Welcome to Talk Law Radio with attorney Todd Marquardt of the Marquardt Law Firm at marquardtlawfirm.com.
Welcome back to Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt. We're here talking with Josh Hummer, attorney from Virginia and West Virginia, and you're probably wondering, why would we do this to you? Because most people are here in San Antonio, but there are listeners all over the United States and some in foreign countries I can hardly pronounce, and so I appreciate all of you listening. I do want to get somebody to call the show and ask a question about relationships and families and inheritance and passing things on or receiving an inheritance or fighting about an inheritance, because this book, Fearless, is a book that Josh wrote, and I want to give a copy away, but I want you to ask a question to Josh about something that maybe a friend or family member is struggling with right now. They just don't know how to divide things up or what's going to be important or what they should watch out for to make sure that there's no fighting. I do have a lot of clients, they ask, well, how can I keep my kids from fighting? But I'm sure you have some strategies for that. I read about some of them in the book. But let's talk about how you made the transition from what seemed to me to be like a general practice attorney when you were working for somebody else to going out on your own and focusing on estate planning and elder law. Tell us about how you did that and why.
Yeah, and I'd love to tell you, Todd, that it was some master plan that I had, but I've depending on your faith, I've either been led into it or fell into it. But I was a litigator, so did a lot of litigated all sorts of cases, all types of cases, but knew I didn't like that. And to be honest, it was starting to have some impacts on my relationships and even me physically. So decided to leave the firm I was with and go out on my own, because they weren't going to change their practice areas,
Right.
and focusing on business and estate planning. And just over time, estate planning seemed to be I love small businesses. You and I talked about that before the show started. It's who I am. It's who you are. Love them. Enjoy meeting them. But estate planning seemed to be a way we could have a larger impact, particularly once we started learning some things about how important relationships were in estate planning and the opportunities estate planning provides to impact those.
Okay. And so within your estate planning practice, you started to notice the interplay of relationships between the person creating the estate plan for an inheritance and the people who were actually inheriting the plans. Is that how that happened?
Yeah, and I'm sad to say it took me a long time to figure that out, but that is right. And certainly noticed that the financial focus that I had traditionally brought to estate planning was not addressing some of the deepest needs and pains and problems that people have. And I remember I'll be brief with my story, but I remember one lady in particular that I was sitting with, and I thought I had done a tremendous job at saving her money on taxes as part of her estate plan. And I could tell she just wasn't that interested in what I was doing for her. And I remember finally asking her, like, what's wrong with the trust we've put together? What's wrong with this? And she said, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm just upset because I have not been able to see my granddaughter in 3 months because I had a fight with my daughter-in-law. And Todd, I was dumbfounded. I had nothing to say. I had nothing tools to offer her. And that was kind of the beginning. And then as I started paying attention more to relational issues, I noticed when plans were implemented, just all sorts of problems. And I'm sure you've seen this and your listeners have probably heard of this. Somebody would die and just people coming out of the woodworks and going after each other and families being torn apart. And it really caused me to start asking some tough questions, which led to the development of relational estate planning and beginning to have that focus, and then which has even led to seeing estate planning itself as a tremendous opportunity to impact those around you for good and to have a tremendous positive impact in their lives. So yeah, there's it's obviously a longer story, but that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, well, those are good reasons for focusing on that. And I do think that God works in our lives and leads us on certain paths. So that's the way I would see it as an outsider looking at
Yeah,
your life, that you were probably led that way.
yeah, I would certainly agree.
Okay, well, I want somebody to call in. I forgot to give the number. It's 210-308-8867. Or if they want to call from out of town, 866-308-8867. Or you can text Todd. That's me at 210-538-4770. 210-538-4770. Ask a question about family dynamics and estate planning, relationships and estate planning, and or you can even say, my friend told me, or my neighbor thinks this. We'll keep you anonymous. Um, it's a good way for you to get some of Josh's experience here on the air. Okay, next I wanted to ask about the book. I wanted to find out, how did you get the idea to write a book?
Yeah, it was a couple of friends of ours who are much better at marketing than I am, and pretty much anybody's better at marketing than I am, Todd. I went to law school and computer science. Marketing has not come naturally, but they recommended that, and that was about the same time we were beginning to realize that helping people think about their aging and death in terms of relationships had just incredible power behind it. And so writing a book is one of the most painful things I've had to do, and I would include the bar exam in that and completing law school. It is not for the faint of heart, but I had some help from a co-author but still it was a wonderful opportunity. What it forces you to do is organize your thoughts. And so
Mm-hmm.
I went into writing the book not really understanding and not having thought through a lot of the stuff about relational estate planning and the different ways we talk about it, and came out on the other side with a framework. But it was probably 2.5 years, and multiple complete rewrites.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's a great thing to have done. It is not an easy thing to do, and I had help. So for the folks who are out there doing it on their own, a huge hat tip.
Yeah. Well, that I'm glad you mentioned 2.5 years, because I was going to ask you how long it took you to finish it. I noticed that the publisher is located there in Winchester. Was that a coincidence? How did you find a publisher?
Yeah, so I found a publisher and I guess I found a publisher by creating a publisher, and so um,
Oh,
we
okay.
we we simply decided,
Self-published.
yeah, but
Okay.
for liability and other purposes, we created another entity.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But it's actually quite easy to create and publish a book. Um, in the last 10 years, it's become very feasible. So we didn't even look at other publishers, although they are out there.
Mm-hmm.
But we tend to give the book away mostly. It certainly sells some, but the vast majority of copies are given away. And so having a publisher means the cost for doing that goes up. So we chose not to do that.
Right. And it's probably a good way to teach your clients what are some important aspects of their plan.
Absolutely, and particularly the non-legal parts of the plan, which might be something that one of your listeners has a question about, but they come in, thinking about estate planning in terms of wills or trust at best, but many of them have not thought about the even the practical pieces that go along with that. And I'm sure you see people who, they have a huge, thick plan that some attorney killed a couple
Mm-hmm.
trees to write for them, but
Yeah.
it's never been implemented. It's never been tied to anything, or nobody knows what where the accounts are, or who to
Mm-hmm.
call. And so that's a piece. And then the relational piece and, the ethical wills and the gifts and memories list is something that, um, uh, the book just tends to be a good way to communicate that, a good medium instead of me trying to talk to them during a meeting or
Mm-hmm.
something else like that. We frequently have folks who the book is a way of explaining that in a digestible format for them.
Yeah, I like that, and I like the way that you structured it. I think it's very helpful, um, at least for somebody that already knows all of the legal aspects. You still may have to explain, some of the ways that it's important or useful to do those other things. But you
Yeah.
brought up ethical will, and there's probably some people out there that don't even know what that means. So would you explain that a bit?
Sure, and I love talking about ethical wills. So, long and short, an ethical will is a way of leaving behind your values and beliefs. And the word ethical comes from the Greek word ethos, which is also has the meaning of character. And so when you talk about leaving it's think of it as leaving a character will. This is an emphasis on what was important to you. It is a tremendously powerful tool. It has a wonderful history. It's Jewish in origin, and for your listeners who are familiar with the Old Testament, the first use, according to the Jewish people, is when Jacob died, and he called all his children around him, and he not only told them what he thought of them, but he also cast this vision for them that they would return from Egypt to the nation of, or to the land of Canaan. And that actually happened, right? 400 years later, according to the Bible, the Jewish people were still a people group with the same culture and language, and they did remember all of this stuff, this vision that had been cast 400 years before. And that's longer than the US has been around,
That's
Todd, right?
right.
Like that's a tremendous accomplishment in a culture that did not have the same, didn't have any of the same technology that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And long story short, the Jewish culture has continued to use them and has viewed it as an obligation of the older members to take the time to be very intentional about passing on things that they thought would be helpful, not financially. And you and I know, Todd, like money doesn't solve problems. In fact, it creates problems frequently than it solves problems. So passing on values and beliefs is so much more important than just passing on financial resources. And so the you can go back and read these ethical wills from Jewish people throughout the last couple millennia, and recently it's been adopted by many other folks outside of the Jewish culture and faith. And sometimes it's called legacy letters, sometimes
Right.
it's called ethical wills, but yeah, we absolutely love them. And as someone who implements plans, I can tell you that when someone takes the time to do this, it 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 has tremendous power in a unique way in estate planning when someone has died and they have been intentional about communicating. And I don't mean to keep going on, but
Well,
as you
let's
can
talk
tell,
more after the
yeah,
break. We gotta take a break.
I'll take a breath then.
This has been Talk Law Radio with attorney Todd Marquardt, brought to you by the Marquardt Law Firm. You can learn more at marquardtlawfirm.com. And be sure to listen to the full Talk Law Radio show Saturday mornings at 11 on 9:30 a.m. The Answer.
Each week, attorney Todd Marquardt talks about the law. His mission with the Talk Law radio show and podcast is to help you discover your legal issue blind spots. In the beginning, God had one law. Don't eat from the fruit of that tree. Then came the Ten Commandments. Now we have federal, state, and municipal lawmakers that won't stop creating new laws. Laws that might impact you without you knowing it. Listen to the show and drop a line on Facebook or email host@talklawradio.com and let the host know what you think of the show, the topics you want to hear, and whether you want to be a guest.